Hello and welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's week 9, and a lot of the good matchups for running backs this week are for players who are already automatic starts in your lineup. So for this video, I'm going to bring up 5 players who I think need to be started this week because I either trust them enough in a bad matchup, or I think the matchup is so good that you can disregard all of the risk that they normally carry and plug them in. So for this video, I'm going to list my top 5 must-start running backs for week 9. Typically, I would not recommend a running back going up against the Saints. It's typically a big downgrade. However, his role in the passing game overrules any concerns that I think you should have about his efficiency running the ball. I'm talking about Cordarrelle Patterson, and I don't think that he should be on your bench this week. Not only is he already getting a massive workload through the air, in this game, Calvin Ridley has already been ruled out once again. So I'm going to compare his per game stats through 7 games this year to the 2 games without Calvin Ridley, and you can see that the workload definitely goes up. This season, Cordarrelle Patterson is averaging 13.7 touches per game, but in those 2 games without Ridley, it goes up to 17.5. He's typically only getting 5.9 targets a game, but without Ridley, it's 7 per game, and he's catching 6 of them, which would rank first among all running backs in the games without Calvin Ridley. He's averaging 85.9 yards from scrimmage this season, but in the games without Ridley, that goes up to 92.5. The only thing that comes down is his touchdown rate. He's averaging a touchdown per game this year, but in those 2 games without Ridley, only 1 touchdown and an average touchdown rate of only 0.5 per game. That ranks as RB25 in the league as opposed to his top 3 rate. 16.9 half PPR points per game. Typically this season ranks as running back 8, and in the 2 games without Ridley, only 15.25. That ranks as running back 14. So even though he takes a tick down in half PPR points, they're far less touchdown dependent, and I think you can definitely count on the floor with Cordarrelle Patterson. In a standard league, he's definitely more risky this week and very touchdown dependent, but in any type of PPR format, he is a lock-it-in RB2 and a clear top 15 running back in my opinion. So keep Cordarrelle Patterson in your starting lineup. He does not deserve to be benched in this game. The next player on this list is very matchup dependent and normally is reserved for a spot on your bench. However, in this week against Houston, I trust Myles Gaskin. He is my running back 14 in my rankings this week. And this is the type of game that you hold on to Myles Gaskin for, hoping to start him. In the last 7 games, the Texans' run defense is giving up 158 rushing yards per game, which is tied with the Chargers for worst in the league by a wide margin. But to running backs specifically, they're giving up 138 rushing yards per game on 5.3 yards per carry. And in those last 7 games, they've given up 9 touchdowns to running backs. So Myles Gaskin is set up for success. And even though his per game stats through 8 games are kind of risky, I don't think you should be concerned. Normally, Myles Gaskin is only getting 12.1 touches per game. That ranks 39th, 5 targets a game. That ranks 9th, so in PPR leagues, he is definitely valuable. But only 3.9 receptions per game puts him 11th in the league among running backs, and altogether, only 55.5 yards per game from scrimmage. That only ranks 39th among all running backs, and a pretty average touchdown rate of 0.38 per game ranks 35th. So there's nothing really special about Myles Gaskin. He also only runs the ball for 4.2 yards per carry. That ranks 35th in the league. And in fantasy, he's only putting up 9.7 half PPR points per game. That ranks as running back 34 on a per game basis. So there's obviously plenty of risk with Myles Gaskin, but he has had a couple blow up games this year where we've seen his potential. And I think this week you can bank on the upside with Myles Gaskin. I want him in my roster because this matchup just looks so good on paper. Now, ideally, you are starting him in some type of PPR format. However, I don't think that it matters for him to be productive. I think the Texans are just so atrocious against the run that they're going to give up a lot of yards to Myles Gaskin, and I don't think that Salvon Ahmed is going to vulture him for too many touches. My major concern this season is that Malcolm Brown has been vulturing him on the goal line, but Malcolm Brown is on IR, so that's not going to be a factor in this game, and Myles Gaskin is going to be a safe bet to put up double-digit fantasy points. I trust him as a top 15 running back in week 9. Another player I trust this week is Josh Jacobs, my running back 15 at the New York Giants. The Raiders are coming off a bye, and health has been a question mark for Josh Jacobs this season. His stats running the ball haven't been very good. He's only averaging 3.4 yards per carry this year, and that's well below average. This season, in 5 games, Josh Jacobs is only seeing 14.8 touches. That ranks as running back 24, but he's also catching 2.8 receptions per game, and that ranks as running back 20. He's turning that into only 62.8 yards per game, and that only ranks as running back 31, but he's scoring at an elite rate. An average of 1 touchdown per game, 5 touchdowns in 5 games, and that touchdown rate ranks tied for 3rd among all running backs this season. So Josh Jacobs is very reliable on the goal line, and that's why he's scoring 13.7 half PPR points on a per game basis this year. That ranks as running back 18. And even though these stats are very touchdown dependent, his career points to them not being a fluke. In the last 20 games of Josh Jacobs' career, all of the games that he's played for the Vegas Raiders, he has scored 17 touchdowns in his last 20 games. I think he will be an efficient running back this week against the Giants and also score another touchdown because the Giants' run defense is definitely below average. They've been giving up 123 rushing yards per game this year. That ranks 22nd in the league. And to running backs specifically, they're giving up 110 rushing yards per game on 24.5 carries per game and giving up 4.5 yards per carry. They've also surrendered 5 rushing touchdowns in 8 games this year, and I think the odds are in favor of Josh Jacobs scoring once again. I trust him coming off the bye, and I think he scores a touchdown, and with that, his floor is going to be very high. I think you can rely on Josh Jacobs in week 9. But to round out this video, I'm going to give you 2 players who are more in the flex consideration, and I have them both ranked outside the top 20. And if I'm a little bit more desperate for a high upside flex play, I think this is where you want to look. First name I'm going to bring up here is Boston Scott, my running back 23 this week. And the video wouldn't be complete if I didn't bring up the atrocious Chargers run defense in this must start running back segment. They've had the worst run defense in the NFL this year, only through 7 games. They give up an average of 158 rushing yards per game. And this week they face the Philadelphia Eagles. So normally this would be a no-brainer and you would just lock in the starting running back for the Eagles into your lineup. But picking which player is going to be the best fantasy back for the Eagles this week is not that easy. Last week was the first week with Miles Sanders on IR, and the Eagles ran the ball 46 times in their blowout win to the Lions. However, no running back saw more than 13 touches in this game, and that's not a pretty big workload. With that type of volume, I think the upside is a bit capped for every single Philadelphia running back. This is going to be a game comparable to that Baltimore game where 3 different running backs scored a touchdown and none of them saw more than 10 carries. But if there's only one player that I can pick, I am putting my money on Boston Scott. He is my preferred player of the 3. I am a little bit worried about Kenny Gainwell after his poor performance last week. I think he's a bit unreliable and not a very safe bet to score a touchdown. However, Boston Scott, in the games in his career where he sees at least double-digit touches, he has actually been a very reliable fantasy running back. So he's played 4 seasons in Philadelphia, and in his 37 games, he has 8 games with 10 plus touches. So let's look at those per game stats in those 8 games. He averages 15.5 touches per game. That ranks 21st this season. He's catching 3.25 receptions on average in those games. That ranks as running back 16 this year on a per game basis. And shockingly, he puts up 86.9 yards per game from scrimmage on average when he gets at least 10 touches. But he's also very reliable to score a touchdown. He scored 7 times in those 8 games, and that touchdown rate of 0.88 per game ranks as running back 9 on a per game basis this season. So altogether, 15.6 half PPR points per game is what Boston Scott averages. And this season, that ranks as running back 13 on a per game basis. So I think that the touches are going to be a little bit lower than that this week, and the upside is a little bit limited. But as long as he scores a touchdown, I think that he is a safe bet for at least 12 fantasy points, and I think he has the best shot at doing that between him, Jordan Howard, and Kenny Gainwell. So give me Boston Scott as my preferred running back in Philadelphia this week. And I think you can rely on the matchup. The Chargers defense is definitely the best opponent to be going up against for any fantasy running back this year. And then the last player on this list is a little bit more of a gut call, but he's my running back 24. It's James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. And there's definitely some risk. These division games in the NFC West sometimes are very low scoring, especially between the Cardinals and the 49ers. And there's a bit of risk that the Cardinals don't show up in this game because Kyler Murray is a bit injured. But I do think that he's going to play, and I think that that means this is an ideal game script for the Cardinals to run the ball. And I think they're going to lean more heavily on James Conner than Chase Edmonds. Originally in my running back rankings video, I ranked James Conner below Chase Edmonds, but as I've looked closer into these stats, I have flipped it and I've switched it to where James Conner is my running back 24 and Chase Edmonds is my running back 26. And there's a game earlier in the season between these two teams where we can look to for what to expect. So in week 5, the Cardinals and the 49ers played each other, and James Conner actually led the touch split between him and Chase Edmonds. He had 11 touches to Chase Edmonds' 9, so it wasn't a massive advantage there. But despite a low yards per carry, he was the only running back to get into the end zone. On the season, James Conner has definitely been the running back you want when it comes to scoring touchdowns. He scored 8 this year, and Chase Edmonds has only scored 1 last week. And the key part of Chase Edmonds' fantasy game is catching the ball. This year, the 49ers have only given up an average of 13 receiving yards to opposing running backs on a per-game basis. So that's very low, and I don't like how those stats look for Chase Edmonds this week. I think he has a very low ceiling, and his role in the passing game is going to be quite limited. That's why I think James Conner will be leaned on more so than Chase Edmonds, and I think his odds to score are the best of any flex option, because let's face it, 8 touchdowns this year is 1 on average per game, and that is the 3rd highest rate in the NFL among running backs. So James Conner is a safer bet in that regard, and that's why I would trust him as a top 25 running back play this week. My preferred Cardinals running back in week 9. So those are my top 5 must-start running backs this week. Cordarrelle Patterson is not a player I think you should bench. Myles Gaskin needs to be in your lineup this week against Houston. Josh Jacobs is a very safe bet to score a touchdown, so I think he's a top 20 option. Boston Scott is my favorite Eagles running back in a great matchup against the Chargers. And James Conner is the player my gut is telling me to go with in Arizona. And those are my top 5 must-start running backs. So that's going to wrap up this video. I'm going to try and get my must-start wide receivers out today, but odds are it's probably going to come out tomorrow morning. If you want to make sure you don't miss that video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so those videos come to you. But my name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt. Have a good day.